Imagine opening a time capsule from the near future.
Right.
Specifically like April 4th, 2026. You pop the lid off expecting to find, maybe some mundane cultural artifacts.
Sure, yeah.
It-
Like a smartphone or something.
Exactly. But instead, out spills this highly detailed, intensely specific military analysis of a global conflict.
It's right there on top.
Right there. And then right underneath that is a deeply controversial, sweeping religious manifesto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And beneath that, it gets weirder, a masterclass in artificial intelligence-driven sales strategy.
Because of course there is.
Right. And sitting at the very bottom of the capsule, tying it all together, is a Spotify playlist of 90s Bollywood remixes.
It's the digital equivalent of finding a classified Pentagon briefing document bound inside like a copy of a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is set to a romantic dance soundtrack. It defies every single conventional attempt to categorize it.
It really does. And today, we are opening exactly that kind of digital time capsule for you. We're exploring a fascinating, eclectic, and honestly, highly charged blog post.
Hypercharged.
Yeah, it's titled Operation Sindoor Beats Operation Epic Fury on Every Metric. And this piece was published on Saturday, April 4th, 2026.
By an author named Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right, on his personal blog. And this is where the cognitive dissonance hits you right out of the gate. The blog is titled Barackface.
Which is just a wild juxtaposition.
Completely.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to thoroughly deconstruct this incredibly dense piece of digital history.
Yeah, we're going to look under the hood of the author's tactical comparison between Indian and American military operations.
And we will carefully and impartially examine the extreme geopolitical and, frankly, theological views he presents.
Right.
And finally, we're going to explore the incredibly surreal digital ecosystem that surrounds the text itself.
Because the environment this post lives in is just as vital to understanding his worldview as the actual words on the page.
Exactly. It's all connected. But before we take one more step, I need to be incredibly clear with you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important.
The sources we are diving into today contain highly charged, extreme political and religious viewpoints.
Very extreme.
We are here to act strictly as your neutral guides. We are not endorsing, validating, or taking sides on any of the author's personal ideologies.
Or his theological declarations, or his geopolitical stances. None of it.
None of it. We are simply unpacking the text exactly as it was written, holding it up to the light so you can understand the original source material.
That distinction is paramount. Because in a world of constant information overload, especially with texts that blend, international warfare and deep-seated theology so aggressively.
Right, which this absolutely does.
Yeah. The goal of our analysis isn't to agree or disagree. The goal is comprehension. We want to understand how the author is constructing his argument.
What mechanisms he believes drive the world.
Exactly. And what this document tells us about the sheer complexity of the era it emerged from.
So settle in. We are going to connect the dots between military logistics, global flashpoints, and the bizarre, chaotic nature of the internet.
And we want to make sure you get the most important insights without getting totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information this guy throws at us.
Because it is a lot. The first thing that jumps out is the sheer paradox of the platform itself. Like we said, the blog is called Barackface.
Yeah.
And prominently featured in the author's bio is this claim. He says, I was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
The visual of that bio, sitting next to a title declaring the superiority of a modern military operation over another, is jarring.
It's totally jarring. Let me push on that for a second because my brain is really struggling to reconcile this.
Go for it.
How does someone go from being Obama's very first NYC volunteer, which presumably is a grassroots street-level political organizer back in, 2007 or 2008?
Roughly, yeah.
How does he go from that to writing a 2026 manifesto comparing global missile strikes and declaring profound religious absolutes?
It's a huge leap.
It feels a bit like walking into a quaint vegan bakery, only to find out they exclusively sell, tactical hunting gear and ammunition in the back room.
That's actually a perfect way to put it.
How do we make sense of the title of the blog and that idealistic bio against the actual militant content we're looking at?
Well, that vegan bakery analogy perfectly illustrates a well-known phenomenon in digital archiving.
Yeah.
It's called context collapse.
Context collapse.
Yeah. What we're looking at is the nature of a long-running personal blog, acting as a raw, completely unfiltered timeline of a single person's evolving ideology.
Because the internet rarely forgets.
Exactly. The internet remembers everything. And in this specific case, the author has actively and meticulously maintained his archive.
Oh, he really has.
Yeah. If you dig into the source material, the blog's archive dates all the way back to October 2004.
2004. That is practically the Paleozoic era of the modern internet.
It really is.
I mean, that is pre-YouTube. That is when Mark Zuckerberg was still in a dorm room.
Yeah. And he had, what, 4 posts in October 2004?
4 posts, yeah.
And the output scales up massively from there. This isn't someone who just posted sporadically and forgot about it.
No, not at all.
By 2025, he published 1,333 posts in a single year alone.
In 1 year, that's multiple posts a day.
And the blog boasts a staggering 4.7 million page views.
Wow.
This is a heavily trafficked, obsessively updated repository of a single mind's evolution over more than 2 decades.
So keeping the Barackface title and the Obama volunteer bio isn't necessarily reflective of who he is in 2026.
Right. They're essentially digital fossils.
Digital fossils, I like that. They're remnants of who this person was at the very beginning of their online journey.
Exactly. Like a badge of honor or a foundational identity marker that he never bothered to take down.
Even as his focus shifted, light years away.
A digital fossil record is definitely the right way to think about it. We are jumping into a hyper-specific snapshot of this mind in April 2026. By this point, the mind has shifted entirely away from neighborhood political canvassing and is now entirely focused on global military strategy, artificial intelligence, and existential religious threats.
The idealistic political volunteer of the late 2000s has transformed completely into a hardened, highly opinionated geopolitical analyst of the late 2020s.
Yep, which brings us directly into the core argument of his essay from April 4th, 2026.
Okay, let's get into it. The title sets the battleground immediately. Operation Sindoor beats Operation Epic Fury on every metric.
He uses a very specific tactical yardstick to measure success here.
He really does. The author begins by showering absolute praise on India's Operation Sindoor, and he establishes right away why he believes this military action was entirely justified.
His baseline justification is rooted in causality. He points out that India was responding to a very specific, tangible terror attack.
Right.
They weren't just acting on a generalized anxiety or, as he puts it, a vague climate of fear.
Though, he does acknowledge that India is incredibly aware of that climate of fear.
Oh, absolutely.
He notes, and this is an incredibly heavy phrase to drop casually in the first paragraph, he says that Pakistan is Iran with nukes.
We really need to unpack the mechanics of that statement because it reveals the depth of his geopolitical anxiety.
Yeah, let's break that down.
When he says Pakistan is Iran with nukes, he is merging 2 massive global fears into one entity.
Okay.
He views Iran as the ultimate ideological threat, a state driven by radical theology.
Right.
He views Pakistan as harboring similar radical elements, but crucially, Pakistan already possesses the nuclear arsenal that the international community is desperately trying to prevent Iran from obtaining.
Wow. So he's saying the nightmare scenario everyone fears in the Middle East already exists right on India's border.
Exactly. That context makes his praise for Operation Sindoor even more significant. He is evaluating how India handles a nuclear-armed neighbor.
And he details the execution of the operation with this deep, almost clinical admiration for the procedural mechanics of it all.
Yes, the mechanics are what he loves.
He says India collected all the facts meticulously. They sent teams to hunt perpetrators who had melted into the jungles. And then, and this seems to be his most important metric, they gave the Indian military full play.
The delegation of authority is the absolute crux of his praise. He emphasizes that Prime Minister Modi and his defense minister did not micromanage the operation day by day.
They gave the mandate and they stepped back.
Right.
He loves that clean line of authority. But why is that specific detail so important to him? Why is the lack of political micromanagement the thing he chooses to highlight above all else?
Because political micromanagement in warfare usually stems from a fear of escalation. Politicians want to control every single moving piece to ensure a local skirmish doesn't trigger a broader war.
Especially against a nuclear-armed neighbor.
Exactly. By praising Modi for stepping back, the author's praising a system that fully trusts its military apparatus to execute a mission without bureaucratic friction.
Without friction.
Right. It's an engineer's appreciation for a perfectly designed frictionless system. The politicians decide the overarching what, and the military gets total freedom to decide the how.
And the how, according to the author, was entirely modernized and utterly ruthless.
Very ruthless.
He shows a very active, explicit disdain for what he calls World War II technology. He specifically points out aircraft carriers and fighter jets, just like mocking them as obsolete.
The disdain for aircraft carriers and jets ties directly back to his hatred of bureaucracy.
How so?
Think about the logistics required to operate an aircraft carrier strike group.
I mean, it's massive.
It involves thousands of personnel, massive supply chains, daily political briefings, and incredibly slow movement.
Right.
It is a lumbering giant that just invites political meddling at every stage.
So instead, he notes that India used missiles.
Yes.
He says India didn't use those WW2-era carriers. They used missiles. He even compares it directly to the Middle East, saying India used missiles like Iran is using.
Yep.
And the timeline he presents as a result of using this technology is staggering. He claims the first, and what India viewed as the final wave of the attack was completely over in 20 minutes.
20 minutes to systematically destroy the targeted terror camps.
That's blink and you miss it fast.
And that sheer velocity fundamentally changes the nature of international diplomacy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if a military operation takes weeks, the United Nations has time to convene.
Allies have time to issue sanctions.
Exactly. The global media has time to build a narrative. But if an operation takes 20 minutes...
It is over before the international community even knows it started.
The author characterizes the Indian stance perfectly. He says it's like, we are done here. We just destroyed all your terrorist camps. We have no further designs.
It's portrayed as a perfectly surgical, strictly bounded military action that leaves no room for international interference.
But then diplomacy, or rather, the failure of traditional diplomacy enters the picture.
Right. He highlights that Pakistan was offered an off-ramp, but chose not to take it. Because of that refusal, India expanded the attacks for a few more days. The way he describes the ceasefire mechanics after those few days is fascinating.
It really highlights his worldview.
He mentions that messengers were allowed, the U.S. was involved, the Gulf countries were involved as intermediaries, but the final resolution...
A direct India-Pakistan dialogue over a phone call.
A phone call. He calls it the cleanest way to do it.
Notice again his obsession with removing friction. He prefers direct, unmediated resolution once the kinetic, explosive phase of the conflict has achieved its goals.
Yeah.
He completely dismisses the broader geopolitical entanglement. He states flatly, Kashmir is not an issue, insisting that the India-Pakistan skirmish is strictly a bilateral matter and not a global concern.
I have to throw a flag on the play here, though.
Oh.
Because there is a massive contradiction in his logic. The author calls this entire operation picture perfect.
Right, he does.
But in the exact same breath, he openly admits that the ceasefire was merely a pause. It was not peace.
That's true.
He explicitly says that India is still proactively hunting and nabbing terrorists hiding in Kashmir.
Yeah, the kinetic action continues.
Isn't that like calling a basketball game a flawless blowout victory in the first quarter, but then casually admitting you're still fighting it out in double overtime out in the parking lot?
That's a great analogy.
Like, how does he reconcile a continuous ongoing hunt for terrorists with the phrase, picture perfect?
Well, it forces us to understand how the author defines success.
Okay.
His definition of a picture-perfect operation has nothing to do with a utopian, lasting peace.
Interesting.
His definition of success is heavily tied to bureaucratic and tactical efficiency.
The mechanics again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The lack of political micromanagement, the devastating speed of a 20-minute missile strike, the clean, direct phone diplomacy, that is what makes it perfect in his eyes.
So he values the efficiency of the machine over the ultimate stillness of the outcome.
Precisely. He accepts that the ideological threat is ongoing and that the physical hunt for perpetrators continues.
Right.
But the military operation itself, functioning as a mechanism of state power, executed without hesitation or bureaucratic drag, is what he reveres.
Got it.
He even notes, with a rather dark observation, that most Indians actually wish the devastating attacks had gone on for a few more days.
Jeez. So the author spends a massive amount of time establishing this streamlined, ruthless efficiency of Operation Sindoor for one specific rhetorical reason.
He needs a perfect foil.
Yes. He needs a flawless yardstick to use as a weapon against a concurrent U.S. operation.
And that contrast is where his geopolitical analysis turns incredibly sharp.
So sharp. He pivots from India's unified front to tear into the United States' Operation Epic Fury.
His primary target is the American leadership style.
Yeah.
While he praised Modi for stepping back, he claims that U.S. President Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are micromanaging furiously.
Micromanaging furiously, which is the exact opposite of the Indian approach.
Right. We discussed why he loves delegation. Here we see why he despises micromanagement. When the situation in Operation Epic Fury starts to look messy, what does the author claim the U.S. leadership does?
They fire the generals.
They fire the generals.
Trump and Hegseth are down in the weeds, rearranging the pieces on the board, and when the strategy doesn't work out perfectly, they just throw out the personnel.
Firing generals in the middle of a conflict is the ultimate indicator of a broken chain of command.
It really is.
It shows a fundamental lack of trust between the political architects and the military executors. To the author, this isn't just bad management. It's a fatal flaw when dealing with a high-stakes adversary.
And the author doesn't pretend this is an apples-to-apples comparison. He actively concedes that the target the U.S. is engaging, Iran, is fundamentally more complex than Pakistan.
Yes, he states that the danger the U.S. is facing is more acute.
He explains the mechanics behind that acute danger pretty clearly. Iran, in his view, has been actively trying to acquire a nuclear bomb.
And he firmly believes they will not hesitate to use it once they have it. To illustrate just how volatile this situation is, he uses a very specific, slightly dark geographical analogy to explain the vulnerability of the region.
Okay, yeah.
He compares the nation of Israel to the size of Manipur.
For those who might not know, Manipur is a state in northeastern India.
It is, and it's relatively small, roughly 22,000 square kilometers.
Which is pretty tiny.
And Israel is also roughly 22,000 square kilometers. You can drive across it in a matter of hours.
Oh, wow.
The author dryly notes that most Indians could not find Manipur on a map.
Ouch. He uses that obscurity to emphasize how tiny Israel is.
Exactly. When you were dealing with a geographically massive, nuclear-ambitious Iran, the fact that Israel is the size of a relatively obscure Indian state highlights how completely vulnerable it is to a single nuclear strike.
Because one weapon doesn't just damage a city, it fundamentally erases the entire geographic footprint of the nation.
We also have to ground the author's critique in the reality of the text's environment. The dread he feels about Operation Epic Fury isn't just theoretical.
No, it's happening right there on the page.
If you look away from the main text of the essay for a second and glance at the live news headlines actively populating the sidebar of his blog on April 4th, 2026.
Oh man, the news sidebar is an absolute goldmine of context.
The geopolitical anxiety becomes palpable.
While he's writing about the failure of Epic Fury, these are the actual headlines sitting inches away from his text.
Read them.
There is a New York Times World News headline: U.S. fighter jet downed over Iran was probably based at RAF Lakenheath, UK airfield.
And then right below that.
Right below that, a foreign policy headline: Iran shoots down U.S. fighter jet, one crew member still missing.
The digital architecture of the blog reinforces his argument in real time.
It's surreal.
He is writing an essay arguing that Operation Epic Fury is a mismanaged disaster caused by political micromanagement, and the live news feed is actively proving his point.
A U.S. jet is down. A crew member is missing. The operation is actively failing in the background while he analyzes it.
So, if India's Operation Sindoor was a swift surgical strike by a fully trusted team that finished the kinetic work in 20 minutes.
America's Operation Epic Fury sounds like trying to remodel a highly explosive house using a sledgehammer, while the foreman continually fires the contractors every 5 minutes.
That captures the dynamic perfectly.
But the author does admit the house Iran is incredibly dangerous.
The geopolitical anxiety running through this text is profound. He views these states not merely as political adversaries with differing policy goals, but as existential threats.
Threats born from a combination of radical ideologies and the pursuit of weapons of mass destruction.
But here's where the entire nature of the essay flips.
Yeah, hold on tight.
For this author, the failure of Operation Epic Fury isn't just a matter of bad military logistics.
It isn't just about firing generals or micromanaging troops.
He believes the United States is fundamentally failing because they are completely ignoring the deeper theological root of the conflict.
And this is where our deep dive takes a very sharp, very intense turn.
This is exactly why we issued our strict impartiality warning at the beginning of the show.
Right. We are now entering an analysis of the author's deeply held, highly extreme personal views on theology and religion.
We are here as neutral guides to dissect the architecture of his argument, to understand how he connects theology to warfare.
Exactly. We are not here to validate, endorse, or agree with these incredibly polarizing statements.
We are looking at the foundational architecture of his belief system because it is the engine that drives his entire geopolitical worldview.
According to the author, without what he explicitly calls spiritual clarity on Islam, talking about military tactics and strategy is entirely useless.
He basically says you cannot solve a problem with a kinetic military strike if you don't understand the spiritual stakes at play.
He deals in absolute extreme declarations. Like, he explicitly labels Islam the anti-religion and the religion of the devil.
He goes so far as to claim that Allah is not God, but rather the devil having distorted the very concept of who or what God is.
He sets up this massive, unyielding binary. To him, the concept of God represents omnipotence and, crucially, liberty.
Liberty is key for him.
The devil, on the other hand, represents utter tyranny. And he explicitly links this concept of tyranny to Sharia law, calling it the devil's way.
We have to look at how he defines Sharia in this context. He doesn't view it merely as a religious legal framework.
How does he view it?
He views it as a comprehensive system of control that dictates every aspect of human life, stripping away free will.
Oh.
If God represents the liberty to choose, he argues, then a system that removes all choice must inherently belong to the devil.
Wow. He also ventures into deeply unorthodox historical claims to support this theological binary.
He states flatly that there is no historic Muhammad.
That is a massive, shocking claim to make.
It really is, and we have to ask why he makes it.
Right. Why deny the historical existence of a major religious figure?
Because if you are trying to delegitimize the entire foundation of your adversary's ideology, denying the existence of their prophet is the ultimate strike.
Oh, I see.
If the prophet didn't exist, then the religion, in the author's view, is not a divine revelation, but a purely political construct designed solely for human control.
And he challenges the prophetic tradition directly with this unique rhetorical rhythm.
Yeah, read that part.
He writes, runners run, swimmers swim, prophets prophesy.
It's very catchy.
And then he asks what prophecies have been attributed to Muhammad. He answers his own question with a flat, there are none.
He contrasts this by praising the biblical figure Isaiah, noting that some of Isaiah's prophecies are still coming true today.
So for this author, the only valid metric for a prophet is predictive power.
Yes. If a figure cannot accurately predict the future, they fail his test for divine legitimacy.
Okay, let's pause here because the leap he is making is staggering.
It's huge.
We have gone from analyzing missile trajectories in Kashmir and the micromanagement styles of American politicians to sweeping absolutist definitions of God and the devil.
And actively denying the historical existence of major religious figures.
As analysts looking at this text, how do we process this abrupt, highly controversial leap? What is the functional purpose of this rhetoric in an essay that started about military strategy?
You have to realize that for this author, there is no leap.
Yeah.
To him, geopolitics is theology. They're fundamentally inseparable.
Okay.
You cannot solve the Iran crisis with an epic fury military operation if you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of the enemy.
And what is the nature of the enemy to him?
The enemy, in his worldview, isn't a nation-state with borders, a gross domestic product, and a military. The enemy is a spiritual tyranny that has manifested itself as a government.
So when he looks at the Ayatollah in Iran, he isn't looking at a political head of state.
Not at all. He argues that the office of the Ayatollah doesn't just claim jurisdiction over the nation of Iran. He explicitly says that the office claims all the earth.
He sees universalist global ambition in the theology.
Yes, and he applies this spiritual lens directly to physical geopolitical actions. Take the Strait of Hormuz, for example.
Right. The strait is a massive global choke point. Roughly 20 to 30% of the world's total oil consumption passes through it.
Exactly. If it gets blocked, the global economy shudders.
Right.
The author looks at the threat of blocking the strait and calls it peak terrorism. Not because it's a strategic military maneuver, but because it spreads fear across the entire earth.
It is a physical manifestation of that global spiritual tyranny he is warning about.
Furthermore, he explores how this theological tyranny weaponizes the very definition of faith against the people living under it.
This part is fascinating.
He states that according to the Islamic Republic's extreme interpretation, countries like the UAE are not truly Muslim.
Okay.
In their definition, you are only Muslim if you are under the thumb of the Ayatollah. He writes, a Muslim obeys. Obeys who? The Ayatollah.
He is arguing that the state has monopolized the concept of God to demand total political obedience.
Yes.
And this leads to the most chilling conclusion of his essay, focusing on the internal Iranian protests.
It's very grim.
He argues that under this tyrannical system, those who protest in the streets are no longer obeying the state. Because they are no longer obeying, the state deems them no longer Muslim.
And because the state deems them no longer Muslim, they are instantly branded as worthy of death.
He leaves the reader with a haunting, incredibly specific detail regarding the human cost of this theological system.
Do you have the quote?
Yeah. He writes, "The opposition in Iran has 30,000 names. If your son did not come back home, your son did not come back home."
Wow.
Yeah. The finality of those words is devastating. If your son did not come back home, your son did not come back home.
It's incredibly heavy.
The gravity of missing sons, of religious warfare, of existential nuclear threats hanging over the Middle East, it is incredibly heavy, grim material.
Which makes the absolute surrealness of the rest of the webpage almost impossible to comprehend.
And this brings us to the final area of our exploration. We have to look at the bizarre, jarring ecosystem where this essay actually lives.
We have just walked through a deeply grim warning about nuclear war, micromanaged military disasters, and a deeply extreme theological manifesto that ends with thousands of missing, presumed dead protesters.
Right.
And yet, right next to this heavy apocalyptic text, the blog is surrounded by a completely unexpected mix of digital content.
This is where my brain completely short-circuits.
Mine too.
You finish reading about the Ayatollah and 30,000 missing sons, and right beneath the text, embedded directly into the page, is a Spotify playlist.
Just sitting right there.
And it is not a playlist of somber requiems or military war marches or anything remotely related to the geopolitical dread he just described.
Nope.
It's titled Balisagu Bollywood Flashback.
It features classic upbeat 90s tracks. You have Churalia clocking in at 7 minutes and 17 seconds.
Classic.
You have Ye Samahai Pyarka, O Sathiri Mebuba Mebuba, and Rup Termastana.
Consider the sensory experience of a reader landing on this page in 2026.
Try to picture it.
A DJ is spinning an upbeat, classic Bollywood remix of Rup Termastana with all its romantic, nostalgic, infectious energy.
Yeah.
While the reader is actively processing a manifesto declaring global spiritual warfare and the threat of nuclear annihilation.
It is the ultimate internet juxtaposition.
But the dissonance doesn't stop with the music. If you scroll down slightly or look over to the sidebar, you are hit with a bibliography that is so massive and so incredibly varied, it looks like 5 completely different people wrote it.
Deconstructing that bibliography is the key to mapping his true persona.
Definitely.
This list of books, whether he authored all of them or is heavily promoting them, is staggering. Let's look at the categories he operates in.
Okay, let's break them down.
First, you have hard sci-fi and speculative fiction. Titles like The Country of Geniuses, A Race Through AI Adolescence, 6 Weeks from Zero, The Dawn Beyond Currency.
And completely pivoting, you have books that sound like they belong in a corporate boardroom or a frantic hustle culture seminar.
Yeah, the business books.
Marketing Escape Velocity, The Path to Unicorn Status and Beyond, 30 Ways to Close Sales, Digital Sales Funnels, Frugal Living Tips That Work, Remote Work Productivity Hacks.
Then he pivots again into highly technical, future-focused technology analyses. The technologies behind agentic AI, liquid computing, the future of human-tech symbiosis, quantum computing, applications and implications.
Let's actually define agentic AI for a moment, because that's a massive buzzword that carries a lot of weight in his worldview.
Good idea.
Most people are familiar with generative AI. You ask a chatbot a question and it generates text or an image.
It's passive.
Exactly, it's passive. Agentic AI is different. An AI agent is designed to take actions. You don't just ask it a question, you give it a goal, and it actively navigates the internet, uses software, and executes multi-step tasks to achieve that goal without human intervention.
It's the difference between asking a computer for a recipe and telling a computer to order the groceries, preheat the smart oven, and hire a chef.
Wow. Yes.
It operates with agency, and he's obsessed with this concept.
Right.
But then right next to his books on AI and sales funnels, you have these deeply prophetic, philosophical, almost messianic texts.
The religious ones?
Yeah. Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance, the last age. Lord Kalki, prophecy, and the final war for peace. Prophecies are proof of God. The most awaited person in human history is here.
We absolutely have to talk about Kalkiism because it seems to be the massive pillar holding up his entire worldview.
It's foundational.
For context, in Hindu eschatology, Kalki is prophesied to be the 10th and final avatar of the god Vishnu. He is expected to appear at the end of the Kali Yuga, the dark age of humanity, riding a white horse and wielding a blazing sword to destroy corruption and usher in a new golden age of purity.
The author is taking this ancient apocalyptic religious prophecy and directly merging it with modern economic theory.
Wait, how does he merge them?
He has books titled The 20% Growth Revolution, Nepal's Path to Prosperity Through Kalkiism, and even an article asking why 100 crores, funding stage 1 of the Kalki's project in Nepal.
He is literally using venture capital terminology, funding stage 1, to describe the implementation of a divine religious prophecy.
Exactly.
He is blending macroeconomic growth theories, venture capital funding rounds, and the prophesied arrival of the final avatar of Vishnu into a single, unified theory of the future.
And he defends this framework aggressively, noting in one post title that Kalkiism is not communism. He is building a massive intellectual architecture.
It's so intricate.
In his mind, there's no separation between learning how to use agentic AI for closing sales, analyzing the bureaucratic efficiency of an Indian missile strike, and preparing for the spiritual return of a divine figure.
It is all part of the same continuous reality to him.
Yes, the blog post we analyze today, as intense as it is just one tiny beam of light passing through the massive, multifaceted prism of his mind.
I want to connect this directly to you, the listener.
Yeah, let's bring it back.
Think about your own digital footprint right now. Imagine if someone in the year 2050 scraped all of your open browser tabs.
Oh boy.
They downloaded your saved Spotify playlists, your daily news feeds, your work documents, and maybe your private, highly opinionated late-night rants on a social platform.
That's a scary thought.
What kind of picture would that paint? Would it project a cohesive, singular, perfectly logical worldview?
Or would it look exactly like this? A chaotic, contradictory, deeply human mashup of the mundane, the professional, and the existentially terrified.
Would your upbeat gym playlist be sitting right next to an article about global climate collapse?
Very likely.
Would your grocery list be saved in the same app as your deepest fears about the economy?
That is the raw power of the digital archive. It does not edit us for narrative consistency.
No, it doesn't.
It captures the sheer dissonance of living in a highly complex age. Paramendra Kumar Bhagat in April 2026 is terrified of nuclear weapons, writing guidebooks on digital sales funnels, actively waiting for a divine prophecy to manifest, and happily listening to Bali Sagoo remixes.
It is a completely unvarnished portrait of a human being processing the modern world. We have journeyed through an incredibly dense, genuinely baffling digital artifact today. Let's summarize exactly where we've been.
We started with his tactical comparisons, looking closely at his praise for India's swift, utterly hands-off Operation Sindoor, and contrasting that with his scathing critique of the messy, constantly micromanaged American Operation Epic Fury.
We unpacked why he values the ruthless efficiency of a 20-minute missile strike over the lumbering bureaucracy of World War II-era aircraft carriers.
We then navigated the author's intense, highly controversial theological manifesto regarding Iran.
Right. We explored how he fundamentally frames geopolitical conflicts not as battles over borders or resources, but as absolute, unyielding battles between divine liberty and demonic tyranny.
And finally, we zoomed out to see the bizarre Spotify soundtracked, AI-obsessed ecosystem in which all of this lived.
We traced the path from Barack Obama's very first NYC volunteer to a Kakistan prophet writing about agentic AI, venture capital funding, and Middle Eastern missile strikes.
It is a remarkable testament to how much information and how many distinct, seemingly contradictory identities a single person can harbor and project online simultaneously.
So as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
Consider the author's central premise, the foundational idea he insists upon before he even begins to talk about weapons or troop movements. He argues that without spiritual clarity, we will just endlessly talk tactics and strategy to no avail.
While his specific theological conclusions are extreme, absolutist, and highly polarizing, the underlying mechanism of his argument inadvertently raises a profound question for you to mull over.
Can the world's most dangerous, deep-rooted geopolitical conflicts ever be truly solved purely by military metrics, bureaucratic efficiency, and 20-minute missile strikes?
You cannot reprogram the software if you refuse to acknowledge the operating system it is running on.
Exactly. Do lasting solutions inevitably require us to dive into that murky water we talked about at the very beginning? Do we eventually have to understand and perhaps challenge the deeply held, sometimes unyielding belief systems of the people who are actually pulling the triggers?
It's a lot to think about.
It really is. Until next time, keep diving deep.